The Miami Heat season has come to an end, which means it begins their offseason. And for a team that made the finals, that went on this dramatic run as an 8th seed, there's actually a lot more to talk about in terms of what could happen with their offseason than you might think at first. Now, when you've made the finals a couple of times since 2020, when you've been arguably the best team in the Eastern Conference over the last few seasons in the long term, the way that Miami has constantly competing at the top, they were the 1 seed last year, they made the finals this year, they made the finals in 2020, all those things together, that to me means that this is a team that is going to try and continue to contend. They're going to try and upgrade their roster despite their playoff seeding this year. It's clear that if they can get to the postseason, they have enough talent to well and truly make some noise. And that to me means they're going to be going after a significant upgrade in the offseason. And the one player that we've gotten a lot of rumors about them trying to make a deal to upgrade their roster with is, of course, Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard himself has said recently that if he was moved, if he did want to move on from Portland, Miami would be a team he would be interested in joining, of course, alongside Jimmy Butler as well as Bam Adebayo. Now, what would that look like? I think that's a really interesting part of this because the value of Damian Lillard is something that we've discussed for years, but now that he's gotten older and his contract is so long and it's so big, you do have to start thinking about, okay, is it maybe a little bit lower than we thought? This realistically is what Miami could offer in a Damian Lillard trade, okay? It would be them getting Dame as well as Devontae Graham just for salary purposes. Portland would get Tyler Herro, Jovic, 2 first-round picks for Miami, including their first this year that they would be able to trade on the night of the draft, as well as the Spurs getting Kyle Lowry here basically in a salary dump. Let's go through this team by team, but we'll leave Miami kind of out of this for now. So for Portland, like I said, it's not a tremendous amount of value. Ideally, when you're trading away a franchise icon like Damian Lillard, just getting an interesting young player in Tyler Herro and a couple of first-round picks, as well as the guy that got picked in the first round last year, like, yeah, you'd like to get a little bit more than that, but I think it's relatively fair given Dame's age and the contract that we discussed. San Antonio is here because it also provides some salary flexibility for Portland. Like, they're taking back significantly less in this deal than they're trading out Damian Lillard, which means Miami kind of has to get rid of the Kyle Lowry salary. He ends up in San Antonio. I've talked recently a lot about having someone like Kyle Lowry or point guard of that kind of stature in San Antonio alongside Victor Wembanyama. It doesn't really matter to them salary-wise, apart from the fact that it does take up a lot of their cap this year. Maybe you throw them a second-round pick or something like that to incentivize this for San Antonio. And then, of course, for Miami, you're getting back someone in Damian Lillard that slides right into the Kyle Lowry slot. As good as Lowry has been at times in the postseason, Dame is still like a first-team All-NBA caliber player right now. You've got him alongside Jimmy Butler. You've got Bam Adebayo, and that extra bit of offense that Dame would provide you is kind of exactly what this team needed during the postseason. Of course, you're losing Herro in that equation. You're losing Kyle Lowry in that equation. But when it comes to late game shot making, big time shooting, all those things Damian Lillard provides them in a tremendous way and would be a really good fit for Miami. I think the argument here would be, is this enough for Portland if they did decide to move on from Dame? Is there another team around the league that outbids Miami? This is still a significant amount, but his exact trade value is a little bit difficult to figure out here. Which segues me nicely into kind of the larger point of the Heat offseason here, and that is the future of Tyler Herro. We saw throughout the postseason that with him getting hurt in the first round, they didn't really need a lot from Tyler Herro in order to have a tremendous amount of success in the postseason. And I'm not saying that they don't need Tyler Herro. I think certainly at different points, especially late in games, his shot making would have been beneficial. His floor spacing would have been beneficial. But there's just a couple of pieces on their roster that they can't play alongside Tyler Herro. Him and Duncan Robinson cannot be on the floor at the same time because of how bad both of them are defensively. And if you have the opportunity, the way that Miami apparently does, to continue to contend, and you can upgrade Tyler Herro, Kyle Lowry, and some picks into someone like Damian Lillard, that is a significant immediate upgrade, which I believe is what Miami is going to continue to try and do here. Not to mention the fact that Herro is going to be going into his new contract next year, is going to be incredibly expensive, and so your expectations for him are going to rise now that he's no longer on his cheaper rookie contract. And so I really think that even if it's not a Lillard trade, I think Herro is going to be kind of dangled throughout the rest of the league. Not that Miami is necessarily better without Tyler Herro. I think certainly they would still like to have him on the roster if they had a choice. But in terms of their ability to upgrade in a significant way, if they're going to make a big deal, if they're going to bring in another all-star, in Damian Lillard's case, an all-NBA caliber player, Tyler Herro has to be in the trade. Bam, Jimmy Butler, those guys are indispensable, and you don't really have a whole lot else to trade here. And if you really want to try and push just a little bit further over that hump, I think this is a team that has been closer to championship winning ways over the last few seasons than anyone really wants to admit. They've been, like I said, arguably the best team in the East for years, and they just haven't quite been able to win that title. If you really want to push over that hump, I think this is the kind of move, and trading away Tyler Herro is the kind of idea that really, really works in that scenario, considering the age of Jimmy Butler. But trades and all that stuff is not the only thing that we need to pay attention to for Miami's offseason, because we've got two big things here. You might be surprised to find this out, but right now, Miami has over $170 million on their payroll for next year. That puts them above the luxury tax line. And that's an incredibly significant number for a team that won in the low 40s in terms of games in the regular season this year. And that's only going to get worse because Max Strus as well as Gabe Vincent are both free agents this offseason. And as we've talked about before, once you get to that luxury tax line and above, it's going to become much more difficult to try and continue to add payroll and add good players to your team. And so Strus and Vincent both, obviously very critical to their postseason run, both of those guys might kind of be priced out of what Miami wants to pay them. I mean, we're looking at guys that might be making between $10 to $15 million a year on an annual basis next season. I wouldn't advise that from other teams because I think there's real reasons that they've been so successful in Miami, and they might not be nearly as successful in other teams. But when you look at how great they performed in this postseason, Strus obviously has had a rough finals, but I really, really think that those guys are going to get significant deals, and it's going to be really difficult for Miami to retain even one of them, and it's going to be pretty much impossible for them to retain both because there's no real way for them to dump salary and save money. And even if they did that, it would be at the expense of someone like Kyle Lowry, and then you're re-signing Strus and Vincent, which I don't really think getting rid of Lowry and then keeping those two guys makes your team any better, which to me further incentivizes the points that I made in the beginning of the video, and that is some kind of significant upgrade. While Jimmy Butler is still in this level of form, even though at times he did have some rough moments, maybe looked a little bit tired, he's still clearly an incredible postseason performer. Bam was awesome in the playoffs, and if you can add one more guy to that, I do think that they can compete with any of the other top teams in the East and maybe even eventually go on to win a title. There were scenarios this postseason where if they had a couple of other things go their way, maybe they could have won the title this year. And given where they're at, how expensive the roster is going to be already, I don't think this is like a tear down rebuild situation where you're trading away Jimmy Butler. I don't think it's a situation where you're just stagnant and you bring back the same group that still was an 8 seed this year. I think they're looking to upgrade, and I think that upgrade most clearly, if he wants to leave, comes in the form of a Damian Lillard trade. Now, if that doesn't happen, there are still other options for them out there. Bradley Beal is a player to keep an eye on. I think Zach LaVine is a player to keep an eye on as well. Really, the archetype they're looking for is another guy that can handle the ball alongside Jimmy Butler, someone that can space the floor, and someone that provides them explosive scoring. Because Miami does a lot of really cool stuff offensively to get some of their shooters open, to get Jimmy Butler in the post, to isolate Bam a little bit in the mid post. They do a lot of cool stuff with that. But sometimes, especially in the playoffs, you need a guy that you can just say, hey, here's the ball, go score. Call for a ball screen, go score. And as great as Jimmy Butler is, he's not necessarily that guy all the time, nor does he do it necessarily in a super efficient way just because he's not a high volume three-point shooter. And so if you see that archetype around the league, the Zach LaVines, the Bradley Beals, the Damian Lillards, guys that shoot a ton of threes, that work well out of the pick and roll, I think that's the kind of player that Miami is going to be looking to add to upgrade this roster and really try and push for a title sometime over the next 2 to 3 seasons.